The moment your life begins to open is almost never the moment you finally control everything. It is the moment you stop demanding that healing arrive in a form your fear can approve of. It is the moment you stop standing at the door of your own life with folded arms, asking reality to explain itself before you let love enter. And yes, I said love, because so much of what you have been calling delay, blockage, confusion, and resistance has really been a deep hunger for love that feels safe enough to receive. You have not been asking for too much. You have not been too sensitive, too emotional, too complicated, too late, or too broken for the life that belongs to you. Somewhere deep inside, you have always known that. But knowing something in your mind and letting it settle into your body are two very different kinds of knowing, and your body has been waiting patiently for you to stop fighting long enough to hear what it has been trying to tell you. Nothing opens in a clenched hand. Nothing truly blossoms in a field of inner war. And if you have been feeling tired in a way rest does not fully touch, tired in your thoughts, tired in your heart, tired in the invisible places where nobody sees the effort it takes just to appear okay, there is a reason. You have been carrying the weight of resistance, and resistance is heavy. It is heavier than grief, heavier than uncertainty, heavier than not knowing. Because resistance does not only ask you to feel pain, it asks you to fight pain at the same time. And that double burden can make even the strongest soul feel like it is slowly disappearing inside itself. Let that settle for a moment. You may have believed that acceptance means giving up. That if you accept where you are, what happened, what did not happen, what still hurts, what still feels unfinished, then somehow you are saying it is fine, it is deserved, it is permanent. But that is not what acceptance is. Acceptance is not approval. It is not surrendering your dreams. It is not shrinking your desires. It is not telling pain it can stay forever. Acceptance is simply the sacred willingness to stop lying about what is here. And that changes everything, because what you face can move, what you name can breathe, what you allow can begin to soften, what you stop arguing with no longer has to scream for your attention. Your heart already knows this. It knows the difference between forcing and allowing. It knows the difference between trying to become worthy and remembering that you are. It knows the difference between endlessly analyzing your life and finally inhabiting it. And perhaps that is why something in you brought you here now, to this exact moment, because you are ready to hear the truth in a deeper way than you have before. You do not open your life by becoming someone else. You open your life by ending the rejection of who you are right now. That may sound simple, and it is not always easy. Because for many people, self-rejection began so early, it started to feel like responsibility. It wore the face of discipline. It sounded like improvement. It disguised itself as high standards, as productivity, as being the strong one, as staying positive, as making sure nobody had to worry about you, as proving you were worth loving by becoming less inconvenient to everyone around you. And after enough years of that, you can forget that your tenderness was never a problem to solve. Your needs were never evidence of weakness. Your emotions were never proof that something was wrong with you. They were messages, invitations, signals from the living intelligence inside you, asking to be met with honesty instead of shame. Have you noticed how often the very parts of you that need the most compassion are the parts you have judged the hardest? The frightened part, the jealous part, the lonely part, the grieving part, the uncertain part, the part that still wants what it says it should be over by now, the part that keeps wondering why it is taking so long, the part that smiles in public and falls apart in private, the part that has become so practiced at functioning that even you sometimes forget how much pain it has been carrying. These are not the parts of you to exile. These are the parts of you that become portals when they are finally met. Because the moment you accept them, really accept them, not as a performance of healing, but as a lived act of inner welcome, something begins to open that force could never access. You stop wasting life trying to outrun yourself, and once you stop running, you can hear, you can feel, you can receive. This is important to hear. Life does not withhold from you because you are imperfect. Life closes where you close. It tightens where you tighten. It waits where you refuse to meet yourself, not as punishment, never as punishment, but because openness cannot enter where self-rejection still stands guard. Love does not force its way through a barricade you built to survive. It waits for invitation. It waits for the softening. It waits for the moment you decide that protecting yourself from disappointment is costing more than the disappointment ever did. That moment is sacred. And it may not look dramatic from the outside. It may look like you sitting quietly one morning with tears in your eyes, finally admitting you are hurt. It may look like you no longer pretending you are fine with a relationship that drains you. It may look like you taking one full breath before criticizing yourself again and choosing not to continue the attack. It may look like you saying, I did want more. I did love deeply. I am still disappointed. I am still tender. I still ache in places I do not show. And none of that makes me weak. That is acceptance, not the polished kind, not the inspirational quote version, the living kind, the kind that changes the atmosphere inside you, the kind that tells your nervous system the war may be ending now. You have been carrying so much that was never meant to become your identity. Old heartbreaks, old roles, old expectations, old versions of yourself shaped by what others needed, feared, projected, or praised. And if you have been confused lately, if your life has felt strange or dull or overly intense or full of endings and pauses and invisible rearrangements, It may be because those old structures are no longer able to contain who you are becoming. Something in you is no longer willing to live from survival alone. Something in you is no longer satisfied with performing peace while privately starving for truth. That is not failure, that is awakening. And awakening often begins as discomfort. It begins as restlessness, as grief, as the inability to keep pretending, as an ache without a clear name, as a deep fatigue with your own patterns, as the quiet realization that what used to work no longer works, and what once numbed you no longer numbs you enough to stay disconnected from yourself. There is mercy in that. Even now, there is mercy in that. Because when old strategies stop working, you are being invited into a more honest life. And the first key to that honest life is acceptance. Not because acceptance fixes everything in one moment, but because acceptance returns you to reality, and reality is where your power lives. Not fantasy, not denial, not endless rehearsal of every possible outcome. Not the imaginary life where nobody disappointed you, nobody left, nothing changed, no time was lost, no mistake was made, no innocence was broken. Power cannot live in what did not happen. It can only live in what is happening now, in this breath, in this body, in this tender and miraculous ability. You still have to choose how you meet your own life. Here is what I have come to understand. Many people do not fear pain as much as they fear what pain seems to say about them. They do not only fear loneliness, they fear that loneliness means they are unlovable. They do not only fear failure, they fear that failure means they are inadequate. They do not only fear rejection, they fear that rejection confirms every old wound that once whispered, not chosen, not enough, not safe, not wanted. So they spend years trying to control circumstances in order to avoid old meanings. But healing begins when you stop making pain into identity. When you accept the pain without turning it into a story of your worth, everything begins to open. Can you feel the difference? One path says, "This happened, so there must be something wrong with me." The other says, "This happened, and I am still worthy of love." One path says, "I am behind." The other says, "I am here." One path says, "I cannot rest until I have solved every uncertainty." The other says, "Uncertainty is here, and I can still belong to myself inside it." That shift may seem small to the thinking mind. It is not small. It is an energetic reorientation of your entire life. Because what you believe about yourself while pain is present determines whether pain becomes a passage or a prison. And perhaps you have lived in that prison long enough. Perhaps you are ready to stop decorating the cage and call it healing. Perhaps you are ready to touch the bars and say, "I see you now. I understand why you were built. and I am not living here forever. Acceptance is often the moment the door appears. Not because the cage was imaginary. It was not. Your pain is not imaginary. Your losses were not imaginary. The loneliness was not imaginary. The abandonment, the disappointment, the betrayals, the long stretches of invisibility, the times you gave more than you had, the seasons when you carried everyone else while quietly disappearing from yourself, none of that was imagined. But the prison becomes permanent only when you decide your pain is the truest thing about you. It is not. Your pain is real, and your essence is deeper. Your wound is real, and your wholeness remains. Your grief is real, and your capacity for joy has not been destroyed. This is where so much opens. In that one shift, in that gentle but powerful refusal to make your current feeling your final identity, you can be heartbroken and still whole. You can be confused and still guided. You can be tired and still worthy. You can be in transition and still deeply loved by life. You do not have to earn the right to breathe more softly. You do not have to earn the right to stop attacking yourself. You do not have to become more convenient before you become more compassionate with yourself. Somewhere deep inside, you've always known that the harsh voice in your mind was never the voice of truth. It may have been the voice of fear, the voice of protection, the voice of conditioning, the voice of old authority figures living on in your nervous system, the voice of a younger self who learned that being hard on herself might prevent rejection, might produce success, might create safety. But it was never the voice of your deepest wisdom. Wisdom does not humiliate. Wisdom does not rush. Wisdom does not threaten you into transformation. Wisdom invites. It illuminates. It waits with you in the dark until you remember how to see. So when you accept yourself, it is not an act of indulgence. It is an act of alignment. You are choosing to listen more closely to wisdom than to fear. You are choosing to stop calling cruelty honesty. You are choosing to stop using self-rejection as a tool for progress. And yes, I know many people have been taught that if they are not critical with themselves, they will become lazy, complacent, unmotivated, undisciplined. But have you noticed how exhausting that bargain has been? Have you noticed how much energy it takes to keep pushing a heart that is starving for kindness? Have you noticed how often growth born from shame eventually collapses under its own weight? What if I told you that acceptance does not make you stagnant? It makes you available. Available to learn without collapse. Available to receive without suspicion. Available to rest without guilt. Available to change without violence. Available to love without bargaining. Available to move forward without leaving yourself behind. That is the opening. It is not always flashy. Sometimes it is a quiet cellular permission, a loosening in the jaw, a softening in the belly, a little more room in the chest, a little less panic around what is unfinished, a little more willingness to let today be today instead of constantly measuring it against the life you thought you should have had by now. That comparison can become its own private suffering, can it not? The age you thought you would be when certain things happened, the relationship you thought would last, the family you thought would look different, the work you thought would feel more meaningful by now, the body you thought would heal faster, the confidence you thought you would have once you worked hard enough, the peace you thought would arrive after one more breakthrough, one more lesson, one more chapter of effort. And when life does not match the image, a subtle resistance begins, not only to circumstances, but to reality itself. You begin withholding your full presence from the life that is actually here, because you are still secretly loyal to the life you expected, that is human, that is understandable. And it is also painful, because you cannot receive the gifts of a moment you refuse to inhabit. Acceptance does not ask you to stop grieving what you thought would be. It asks you to stop abandoning what is. There is a sacred difference there. Let that settle for a moment. You are allowed to mourn what did not happen. You are allowed to feel the ache of unmet timing, unreturned love, unrecognized effort, doors that did not open, versions of yourself that did not get to fully live. That grief is holy. It deserves witness. It deserves tenderness. It deserves room. But grief becomes suffering when you believe you must stay loyal to the fantasy forever, when you refuse the life that still reaches for you because it does not look the way you imagined. Life is still reaching for you. Right now, through this very breath, through the truth you can no longer ignore, through the quiet knowing that some of what you have called waiting is actually withholding. Waiting, G, to feel worthy. Waiting to feel ready. Waiting for certainty. Waiting for someone else to choose you in the exact way you hoped. Waiting for the perfect moment to begin honoring your own heart. Waiting until you are less afraid, less wounded, less human. And what if the opening begins the moment you stop waiting for a version of yourself that does not need acceptance? What if the version of you who is here now is the one acceptance was always meant for? Not the healed future self, not the polished self, not the one who never loses her center, not the one who always knows what to say, not the one who is unbothered and radiant and perpetually certain. This self, this trembling self, this wise and weary self, this still learning self, this brave, hurting, beautiful self, this self who has kept going in ways few people truly understand, this is the one. And the moment you accept this self, everything begins to open, because you are no longer dividing your energy between living and rejecting yourself while you live. Think of how much life force has gone into that division. Think of how much energy has been consumed by self-monitoring, self-correcting, self-comparing, self-doubting, self-pressuring, self-abandoning. No wonder you have felt depleted. No wonder joy has sometimes seemed distant. No wonder receiving has felt harder than giving. You have been trying to bloom while your roots were still being questioned. No flower opens under interrogation. It opens under conditions of enough safety, enough light, enough trust in the process it was made for. And you are not less sacred than a flower. You too need conditions that allow your heart to unfurl. You too were made for opening. You too cannot be shamed into your truest expression. This is where we must speak gently but honestly about the ways you may have mistaken control for safety. Because control often feels righteous. It feels responsible. It feels adult. It feels wise. We say, I am planning. I am preparing. I am being careful. And sometimes that is true. But many times what looks like planning is really fear-seeking certainty. What looks like carefulness is really the refusal to feel vulnerable. What looks like discernment is really exhaustion disguised as wisdom. And underneath it all is a heart that is terrified that if it relaxes, pain will rush back in. I understand that. Your caution has reasons. Your vigilance has history. Your guardedness did not come from nowhere. Some part of you learned that openness could lead to hurt, to loss, to humiliation, to betrayal, to disappointment, to having your needs dismissed or your love mishandled. So you built a careful life around prevention, around prediction, around keeping the variables managed, around staying one step ahead of pain. But here is the tenderness in it. Pain still came. Life still changed. People still surprised you. Endings still arrived. Timing still moved in ways you did not choose. And now you are left carrying not only the pain itself, but years of tension from trying to prevent the unpreventable. That tension can become a way of life. Until you know, tice it. Until you breathe into it. Until you say, I see how hard I have been working to outrun uncertainty. I see how much of my life has been organized around not being caught off guard. I see how often I have treated surrender like danger. And I see the cost now. I see how control has narrowed my ability to receive, to rest, to trust, to be surprised by goodness. This is not a scolding. This is an opening. Because once you see it, you do not have to keep living that way. Acceptance loosens the grip of control by teaching you a deeper form of safety. Not the safety of guarantees, but the safety of self-relationship. Not the promise that nothing painful will ever happen, but the knowing that whatever happens, you will not leave yourself inside it. That is real safety. That is mature safety. That is the kind of safety that does not depend on perfect circumstances. It depends on presence, on inner loyalty, on the decision to stay kind to yourself when life becomes unclear. Do you remember the last time you truly stayed with yourself in difficulty without turning against your own heart? Not analyzed yourself, not improved yourself, not rushed yourself, stayed with yourself, held yourself inwardly, breathed with yourself, listened, allowed, blessed. That changes a person. Because so much suffering deepens not from the original pain, but from the secondary abandonment. The breakup hurts. Then you tell yourself you were foolish. The failure hurts. Then you call yourself incapable. The rejection hurts. Then you decide you are unworthy. The uncertainty hurts. Then you accuse yourself of being too weak to handle it. Again and again, the wound is followed by the self-attack, and that second blow often cuts deeper than the first. Acceptance interrupts that pattern. It says, "This hurts, and I am still on my own side. This is disappointing, and I will not use it as evidence against myself. I feel lost, and I am still worthy of tenderness. I do not know what comes next, and I do not have to punish myself for not knowing." That is not small. That is revolutionary. And if you have been in a season where things feel oddly suspended, where progress seems slower than you wanted, where old emotions are resurfacing, where you are less interested in what once distracted you, where relationships are revealing their truth more clearly, where your body is asking for more rest, or more honesty, or more care, do not be so quick to assume something is wrong. Many times, this is the moment before opening. Not because everything is about to change overnight, but because your inner ground is being prepared for a different way of living. If you have been craving solitude intensely lately, it may be because your soul is trying to gather itself from all the places you have scattered it. If you have been feeling more emotional than usual, it may be because numbness is loosening and aliveness is returning. If you have been less tolerant of what drains you, it may be because your spirit can no longer afford the cost of self-betrayal. If you have been grieving things you thought you had all processed, it may be because deeper layers are ready now, not because you failed before. If you have been restless in a life that looks fine from the outside, it may be because your heart wants truth more than appearance. This is how opening often begins, quietly, truthfully, from the inside first. And this is why acceptance matters so deeply, because acceptance creates the inner conditions for what is true to surface. When you stop forcing yourself to feel what you do not feel, pretending you are okay when you are not, pretending you do not want what you still want, pretending you are over what still hurts, pretending you can carry what is actually too heavy, truth has room to breathe, and truth, once welcomed, rearranges everything. It may rearrange your relationships. It may rearrange your priorities. It may rearrange how you spend your time, your energy, your devotion. It may show you that some of what you called love was really longing for approval. It may show you that some of what you called patience was actually fear of choosing differently. It may show you that some of what you called loyalty was really the refusal to disappoint others. It may show you that some of what you called strength was simply numbness with good posture. Truth does not arrive to shame you. It arrives to free you. And yes, freedom can feel disorienting at first when you have been organized around adaptation for a very long time. When you are used to reading rooms, monitoring moods, anticipating needs, softening your edges, staying agreeable, being the one who holds it together, being the one who understands, being the one who makes things easier for everyone else. Acceptance of your own truth can feel almost dangerous. Because the self you had to become in order to survive may not know yet that it is safe to become more honest. So be gentle. You do not need to rip your life apart in one day. You do not need to make dramatic declarations. You do not need to prove your healing through sudden boldness. Sometimes opening begins with smaller acts than that. A truth you stop editing, a boundary you stop apologizing for, a need you stop minimizing, a grief you stop rushing, a joy you stop distrusting, a desire you stop explaining away, a rest you allow without earning, a no that is clean, a yes that is genuine. This is how life opens, one honest permission at a time. And perhaps that is why the title of your life cannot be written by fear anymore. Fear has had its turn. It has told you to shrink, to delay, to overthink, to prepare forever, to stay half available, to wait until you are certain. But certainty is not what opens the heart. Trust does. Not perfect trust in outcomes. Trust in your ability to meet what comes. Trust in your right to be here as you are. Trust in the wisdom that grows when you stop abandoning yourself. Trust in the quiet intelligence of timing. Trust in the possibility that not every closed door is rejection. Some are redirection, some are protection, and some are simply life making room for what fits more. Be truthfully. This does not mean every loss was meant to be. I do not say that lightly. Not every wound needs to be romanticized. Not every pain needs to be turned into a lesson before you are ready. Sometimes what happened was simply hard. Sometimes what ended was simply heartbreaking. Sometimes what you wanted mattered deeply. Sometimes what you lost changed you forever. Acceptance is not forcing meaning where your heart still needs mourning. It is allowing mourning without deciding your life is over because of it. It is letting the wound be real without handing it the authority to define your future. It is allowing pain to speak without letting pain become your permanent language. Can you feel how compassionate that is? How spacious? How human? Somewhere inside you, there may still be a younger self who thinks acceptance means no one is coming. That if you accept things as they are, you are admitting defeat, admitting abandonment, admitting that the miracle will not happen. I want to speak gently to that part now. Acceptance does not cancel miracles. it creates space for them. Because many miracles cannot enter a life that is clenched around demand. Many forms of grace arrive only when you release the insistence that grace must look one particular way. Many openings begin when you stop arguing with the route and start tending the traveler. You are the traveler, and you need tending. Your body already recognizes this truth. Notice your shoulders softening as you hear it. Notice whether the breath moves a little deeper when you stop treating yourself like a project and begin meeting yourself like a beloved companion. There is wisdom in your body that the mind cannot manufacture. The mind seeks certainty. The body seeks congruence. The mind asks, how do I make this happen? The body asks, what is true right now? The mind rehearses. The body reveals. And when you accept what the body has been trying to tell you, the opening becomes undeniable. Perhaps your body has been saying, slow down. Perhaps it has been saying, this relationship does not feel safe. Perhaps it has been saying, you are tired of proving. Perhaps it has been saying, this pace is not sustainable. Perhaps it has been saying, you need gentleness more than achievement right now. Perhaps it has been saying, the sadness needs witness. Perhaps it has been saying, you cannot think your way out of a wound that needs to be felt. These messages are not inconveniences. They are invitations back into alignment. And alignment is one of the most generous forms of power you will ever know. Because when you are aligned, your no becomes cleaner, your yes becomes clearer, your giving becomes less resentful, your receiving becomes less guilty, your choices become less performative, your relationships become more honest, your rest becomes more restorative, your joy becomes less dependent on permission from the outside world. This is why everything begins to open. Not because the world instantly changes, but because you do. You change in relation to yourself, and that change changes what you can hold, what you can notice, what you can tolerate, what you can choose, what you can release, what you can finally allow to love you. I once knew someone who kept saying she wanted peace, but every choice she made was organized around proving her worth. She worked tirelessly. She overgave in every relationship. She anticipated everyone's needs before they were spoken. She treated rest like weakness and boundaries like selfishness. And when her life began to feel unbearably heavy, she tried even harder. More effort, more positivity, more spiritual practices, but all of them done from tension, all of them done as another form of self-improvement. Until one morning, something in her simply gave way. She sat at her kitchen table before sunrise and said out loud, "I cannot keep earning what should not need to be earned." That was the beginning, not the end of all struggle, not instant perfection, but the beginning of a new honesty. From that moment on, her decisions started changing. Her body softened. Her relationships clarified. Her work became more truthful. And most importantly, she stopped abandoning herself in the name of being good. That is what acceptance can do. It gives you back to yourself, and when you have yourself, life can finally meet you. That may be the deepest opening of all. Because what good is love if it only reaches your mask? What good is success if it requires self-betrayal? What good is being admired if your nervous system lives in quiet panic? What good is progress if your heart does not come with you? You are not here to build a life that looks right and feels empty. You are here to open to truth, open to rest, open to reciprocity, open to being seen more honestly, open to choosing in ways that do not cost your soul, open to the possibility that your deepest transformation begins not when you finally become fearless, but when you stop making fear the authority. Fear is loud, truth is steady. Fear says wait. Truth says begin where you are. Fear says protect. Truth says discern and remain open. Fear says not yet. Truth says now is real enough. Fear says become someone else. Truth says come home. And if you have spent years trying to become more acceptable to yourself, more polished, more evolved, more impressive, more easy to love, more spiritually correct, perhaps this is the moment you stop. Perhaps this is the moment you say, I am done making acceptance conditional. I am done withholding tenderness until I am flawless. I am done treating self-love like a reward at the end of suffering. I am done negotiating with my worth. That declaration changes the atmosphere inside you. An atmosphere matters. A seed responds to atmosphere. A body responds to atmosphere. A relationship responds to atmosphere. A dream responds to atmosphere. Your future responds to the atmosphere you create within yourself. If the inner atmosphere is constant criticism, urgency, fear, and distrust, even beautiful things can struggle to root. But if the atmosphere begins to hold honesty, softness, patience, discernment, and self-respect, then what belongs to you has a place to land. This is why receiving can feel impossible for people who are still at war with themselves. Not because they do not deserve what they desire, but because the internal climate has not yet learned how to welcome it. You may have noticed that sometimes when something good comes near, you tense instead of soften. A compliment, a loving gesture, an opportunity, a moment of ease, a stretch of peace. And suddenly something in you becomes suspicious, braced, watchful, waiting for the catch, the withdrawal, the hidden cost. That is not ingratitude. That is conditioning. That is a nervous system shaped by inconsistency, by loss, by the memory of goodness that vanished, by times when receiving came attached to obligation or disappointment. So of course openness feels unfamiliar. Of course acceptance is needed. Because you must first accept that receiving is hard for you before you can begin making it safer. This is so important. You cannot heal what you keep judging. You cannot soften where you keep performing. You cannot receive where you keep pretending. The opening begins with truth. The truth that rest is difficult for you. The truth that joy makes you nervous. The truth that you do not trust ease yet. The truth that you still think pain is more familiar than peace. The truth that part of you is loyal to struggle because struggle once made you feel valuable. The truth that you learn to measure goodness by how much it cost you. When you accept these truths without shame, they start to lose their grip, not instantly, but steadily, because shame freezes patterns in place. Shame says, hide this, deny this, fix this quickly so nobody sees. Compassion says, come closer, let me understand. And understanding is what allows transformation to move with dignity rather than force. There is another form of acceptance many people resist, and it lives around timing. The timing of love, the timing of healing, the timing of clarity, the timing of recognition, the timing of becoming who you know you are. So many people secretly suffer because they are not only living their present life, they are living it against an internal clock. They believe something should have happened by now. They carry imagined deadlines inside their bodies. They compare their unfolding to other people's milestones, other people's relationships, other people's confidence, other people's external evidence. And every comparison becomes a quiet act of violence against their own pace. But what if your timing is not wrong? What if your life has not been late, but precise in ways your present mind cannot yet understand? What if the delays you resent were also the seasons in which deeper capacities were being formed? What if the person you are becoming could not have been built any faster without breaking something essential? What if the time it took was not proof of failure, but evidence of depth? I am not saying every delay is meaningful in a way that erases frustration. I am saying your worth cannot be measured by the speed of your unfolding. And when you accept your timing instead of warring with it, everything begins to open because you stop spending your life arguing with the season you are in. A winter heart cannot be bullied into spring. It can be warmed. It can be tended. It can be trusted. But it cannot be rushed without damage. And you are not behind, because your blooming did not follow someone else's calendar. You have been ripening in hidden ways. You have been learning things that do not show immediately on the outside. You have been growing roots. You have been becoming more discerning. You have been discovering which forms of love actually nourish you. You have been recognizing where you disappear and where you come alive. You have been gathering yourself. That matters. More than you know, that matters. And one day you will look back and see that some of what felt like emptiness was actually preparation. Some of what felt like silence was recalibration. Some of what felt like being left behind was life refusing to hand you things that no longer matched who you were becoming. But you do not need to force that meaning now. You only need to stop using timing as evidence against yourself. You only need to stop saying, if it has not happened yet, something must be wrong with me. That thought closes the heart. That thought clouds the path. that thought turns waiting into self-punishment. Acceptance says instead, this is where I am. I do not have to like every part of it to stop waging war against it. I do not have to understand the whole map to take one honest breath here. And here is another place where opening begins. When you accept that some people cannot meet you where you deserve to be met. Oh, this one is tender, because many hearts stay closed not only from what happened, but from what they keep hoping will happen from the wrong source. The apology that never comes, the love that never fully arrives, the recognition that remains withheld, the reciprocity that stays inconsistent, the understanding that another person is simply not capable of offering. And you keep waiting, keep explaining, keep shrinking, keep trying different versions of yourself in the hope that if you finally become clear enough, patient enough, lovable enough, they will turn toward you in the way you need. That waiting can steal years. And it is not because you are foolish. It is because hope is holy. It is because the heart wants connection. It is because part of you keeps trying to repair old wounds in present relationships. It is because you still believe love can be secured through devotion. But the opening begins when you accept what someone is consistently showing you. Not because you stop loving, not because you become cold, but because you stop offering your life to a fantasy while your actual heart starves. Acceptance here sounds like this. I see what is here. I see what is not here. I see what I keep hoping will become different. And I stop asking my worth to wait at the door any longer. That sentence alone can open a life. Because once you stop over-investing in what does not truly meet you, energy returns, clarity returns, appetite returns, self-respect returns, time returns. You begin to see how much of your emotional world has been organized around longing and how little has been organized around nourishment. Then you can ask a new question. Not, how do I make this person love me better? But what kind of love allows me to remain whole? That is a holy question. Let it live in you. Not what can I tolerate, not what can I explain away, not what can I endure if I am spiritual enough. What kind of love allows me to remain whole? The same question belongs in your work, your habits, your friendships, your obligations, your inner dialogue, your dreams. What allows you to remain whole? Acceptance is what lets you hear the answer. Because when you are busy proving, performing, pleasing, or panicking, you cannot hear clearly. But when you slow down enough to accept your own truth, the answer grows louder. You will begin to feel what depletes you. You will begin to notice where resentment is actually a boundary asking to be honored. You will begin to sense where obligation has replaced genuine devotion. You will begin to feel when your body says no, even if your conditioning still says yes. And this is where we come to one of the deepest openings of all, the moment you accept that peace is not laziness. Peace is not avoidance. Peace is not the absence of ambition. Peace is the absence of inner violence. It is what remains when you stop using fear to drive your becoming. It is what becomes possible when your goals are no longer built on self-rejection. It is what allows your gifts to emerge without being drained by the constant need to prove. Many people postpone peace. They treat peace as a reward for later, for after the healing, after the success, after the clarity, after the money, after the relationship stabilizes, after the body changes, after the child grows up, after the grief ends, after the world becomes easier, after the nervous system becomes more manageable, after all uncertainty is resolved. But peace is not the finish line. Peace is the ground from which a truer life can grow. When you accept this, everything begins to open. You make different decisions from peace. You speak differently from peace. You listen differently from peace. You love differently from peace. You create differently from peace. You recover differently from peace. Even your boundaries become more loving from peace because they are no longer punishments. They are acts of coherence. Even your ambition becomes cleaner from peace because it is no longer fueled by deficiency. It becomes expression rather than compensation. Even your healing becomes more honest from peace because it is no longer a race to become acceptable. It becomes an unfolding of what has always been worthy beneath the pain. Your sensitivity is a gift. I want to say that plainly. Your sensitivity is a gift. The depth with which you feel, notice, absorb, intuit, remember, respond. That depth has likely caused you pain in a world that often rewards numbness and speed. It may have made you feel too much, too affected, too impacted by what others brush off. It may have made you vulnerable to overstimulation, to heartbreak, to confusion when others are disconnected from what seems obvious to your heart. And because of that, you may have spent years trying to manage your sensitivity rather than honor it. But what if the thing you have been trying to tone down is the very thing through which your life opens? What if your sensitivity is not the obstacle, but the instrument? What if it is how you perceive truth, how you sense misalignment, how you recognize beauty, how you feel the sacred, how you know when something is off, how you love with depth, how you detect what has not been said, how you carry compassion, how you create, how you heal, how you guide, how you pray? Yes, sensitivity without support can become overwhelm. Sensitivity without boundaries can become exhaustion. Sensitivity without self-trust can become confusion. But sensitivity with acceptance becomes wisdom. It becomes discernment. It becomes artistry. It becomes intimacy with life. So perhaps your task is not to become less sensitive. Perhaps your task is to accept your sensitivity so fully that it no longer has to distort itself to survive. Perhaps your task is to build a life that honors what your system actually needs. More slowness, more truth, more beauty, more quiet, more clean relationships, more recovery, more emotional honesty, more room, more warmth, more permission to say, this affects me, and that is not a flaw. The gift of your sensitivity The very thing you thought made you weak is precisely how you will transform everything you touch. Let that land fully, because when you accept your sensitivity, everything begins to open in a new way. Music sounds different. Conversations feel clearer. Your intuition sharpens. Your yes becomes more wholehearted. Your no becomes less guilty. Your body stops fighting for language it has been denied. Your spirit stops wasting energy trying to mimic people whose nervous systems were built differently. You stop comparing your needs to those who can stay longer in places you were never meant to call home. And then you can begin to trust your own design. Trust is another opening. Not naive trust, not blind trust, living trust. Trust that your inner signals matter. Trust that your tiredness means something. Trust that your joy is guidance. Trust that your contractions reveal misalignment. Trust that your longings are not embarrassments, but messages. Trust that your body is not betraying you when it asks for care. Trust that the life that fits you will not require your chronic self-erasure. Trust that what leaves room for your wholeness is more sacred than what merely flatters your image. This kind of trust is not built by perfection. It is built by repeatedly choosing not to abandon yourself. It is built by listening, adjusting, honoring, forgiving, and returning. Return is important because you will forget sometimes. You will overextend. You will doubt yourself. You will slip back into old patterns. You will say yes when you mean no. You will chase clarity in your mind when your body already knows. You will compare. You will grasp. You will panic. You will momentarily treat yourself like a machine again. That does not mean you failed. It means you are human. Acceptance includes that too. Acceptance includes your inconsistency. Acceptance includes your learning curve. Acceptance includes the days you do not feel enlightened at all. Acceptance includes the moments you know better and still do the old thing. Acceptance includes the shame that rises when you notice how long you have been repeating a pattern. Acceptance does not say you should be beyond this by now. Acceptance says, here you are again. Come back. Come back to kindness. Come back to the breath. Come back to the truth that growth is not linear and worth is not at stake. That return is one of the most powerful spiritual practices there is, because every time you return without punishment, you teach your being that home is available, not the perfect home outside you, the inner home, the place where you are not required to earn belonging through flawlessness, the place where your grief can sit at the table with your joy, the place where your confusion can exist beside your wisdom, the place where tenderness is not rushed off stage, the place where the parts of you that once felt unwanted finally hear the words, "You get to be here." And when more of you gets to be here, life opens, creativity opens, intimacy opens, rest opens, clarity opens, Even direction opens, because when you are no longer spending all your energy on internal exile, you can sense what truly calls you. There is something else most people do not realize. Acceptance changes the quality of your decisions. A decision made from self-rejection is very different from a decision made from self-respect. From rejection, you settle, overcompensate, prove, cling, hide, rush, or perform. From self-respect, you choose with more spaciousness. You do not confuse urgency with truth as easily. You do not ignore red flags simply because you are lonely. You do not pursue every opportunity simply because it validates you. You do not say yes simply because you are afraid of disappointing someone. You become more available to what is actually aligned. That alignment is not always immediately comfortable. Sometimes acceptance will lead you to choose what disappoints the old identity. The identity that needed to be needed. The identity that needed to be admired. The identity that needed to be the strongest one, the nicest one, the least demanding one, the most accomplished one, the most spiritually composed one. Acceptance may show you that the image was costing too much, and if so, you may grieve the image. You may grieve the version of yourself that kept you safe in certain rooms. You may grieve the roles that once brought approval. But grief is not regression. Sometimes grief is the soul's way of blessing what once protected you as it prepares to loosen its grip. You do not have to hate your old survival self in order to outgrow her. You can thank her, you can bless her, you can say, "You carried us beautifully, and we do not need to live that way forever." That too is acceptance. And perhaps the deepest acceptance of all is this: you are not meant to control the whole unfolding of your life. You are meant to participate in it. There is a difference. Control tries to secure certainty before movement. Participation says, "I will bring presence to what is mine to bring, and I will release what is not mine to force." Control says, "Only this exact outcome will let me rest." Participation says, "I will meet the unknown with as much honesty and grace as I can." Control is rigid. Participation is relational. Control fears being changed by life. Participation understands that life is, in part, a series of changes through which the soul becomes more itself. When you accept that you are here to participate rather than dominate every outcome, everything begins to open because wonder returns, curiosity returns, flexibility returns. You stop gripping so tightly that you miss what is trying to arrive from a direction you did not predict. You stop turning uncertainty into punishment. You stop making every pause mean failure. You begin to notice subtle invitations, a conversation, a feeling, an idea, a release, a new boundary, a fresh appetite for something that once scared you, a deep no where there used to be compliance, a tiny spark of desire where there used to be numbness. These are not random. These are openings. In the coming days, you might start to notice small shifts like that. Not because you force them, but because acceptance creates room for them. You might find yourself less interested in explaining your inner experience to people who have not earned access to it. You might find your body asking for quieter choices. You might find yourself grieving with more honesty and less shame. You might feel a cleaner distinction between what is yours to carry and what never was. You might feel less urgency to fix yourself and more curiosity about what you actually need. These are signs of opening. Do not dismiss small openings. A life changes through them. A nervous system heals through them. A relationship with self is rebuilt through them. And because you are not separate from life, the way you relate to your own interior world eventually touches everything outside you. When you accept yourself more deeply, you stop participating in relationships that depend on your self-abandonment. When you accept your needs, your work becomes more sustainable. When you accept your pace, your creativity becomes less strained. When you accept your emotions, your body becomes less burdened by suppression. When you accept your limits, your giving becomes more genuine. When you accept your longing, your choices become more honest. When you accept your value, your standards rise naturally. Opening follows acceptance the way dawn follows night, not always all at once, but with unmistakable inevitability. The way dawn arrives without force. I want you to remember that. Dawn does not argue with the dark. It simply arrives. A little light at first, then more, until what seemed hidden begins to reveal itself. That is how many inner openings happen, not through dramatic conquest, but through repeated light, repeated honesty, repeated compassion, repeated return, repeated willingness to stop turning away from what is true. And just as dawn does not ask the night for permission to come, your opening does not require fear to approve it. Fear may complain. Fear may tremble. Fear may imagine disaster. Let it. Fear is not the enemy. It is a frightened part of you. But it is not the leader. It is not the authority. It does not get to decide whether your heart is allowed to soften. Something in you recognizes this. Something in you is tired of treating fear like a compass. Something in you is ready for a gentler power. A power that does not dominate. A power that does not perform. A power that does not make you hard in order to survive. A power rooted in self-honesty, self-respect, and the refusal to keep postponing peace. That is mature power. That is sacred power. That is the power of acceptance. And yes, it may change how you move through the world in ways others do not immediately understand. When you stop hustling for worth, those invested in your over-functioning may be uncomfortable. When you stop minimizing your feelings, those who benefited from your silence may resist. When you begin choosing coherence over appearance, people who only knew your mask may become confused. Let them. Not everyone is meant to understand the language of your opening. Some people were only ever in relationship with your adaptation. Your deeper life is not up for negotiation with those who require your smallness. Acceptance gives you permission to disappoint the image in order to honor the truth. That sentence may be medicine for someone. Read it again inside yourself. Acceptance gives you permission to disappoint the image in order to honor the truth. The image of the endlessly capable one. The image of the always available one. The image of the low-maintenance one. The image of the unbothered spiritual one. The image of the one who never needs, never falters, never says no, never changes, never asks for more, never chooses differently. You are allowed to outgrow every image that costs your aliveness. This is not selfish. This is integrity. And integrity opens things you cannot force, because life responds to congruence. There is a different kind of energy available when your inner world and outer choices begin to align. Your body feels less fragmented. Your mind becomes less noisy. Your intuition becomes less clouded. Your relationships become more revealing. Opportunities begin to sort themselves with less confusion. You become less magnetized by what only mimics love and more available to what actually nourishes. This is how an open life begins, not through endless expansion for expansion's sake, but through deeper coherence. There will still be uncertainty. There will still be human moments. There will still be sorrow. There will still be transitions you cannot control. Acceptance does not erase life's complexity. It gives you a way to inhabit complexity without losing yourself. That is everything. Truly, that is everything. Because the goal was never to build a pain-free life. The goal was to build a life in which pain does not sever you from your own heart. A life in which you can feel deeply without making feeling unsafe. A life in which change can happen without making you disappear. A life in which love does not require self-betrayal. A life in which success does not require chronic fear. A life in which peace is not postponed. A life in which your wholeness matters as much as your output. And perhaps this is the deeper acceptance beneath all the others. The acceptance that your life is not asking you to become less human. It is asking you to become more fully, more compassionately human. To stop dividing yourself into acceptable and unacceptable parts. To stop treating vulnerability like failure. To stop treating tenderness like weakness. To stop treating rest like laziness. To stop treating your emotional truth like something to overcome before you deserve connection. To stop treating your becoming like a performance for an invisible judge. You are already inside the sacred classroom of your life. You do not need admission. You do not need perfection. You need presence. You need honesty. You need enough gentleness to hear what your deeper self has been whispering through every cycle, every ache, every longing, every collapse, every desire for something more true. And what has it been whispering? Perhaps this: come home. Stop fighting what you feel. Stop bargaining with your worth. Stop waiting to be rescued from the life you have not fully entered. Stop trying to become lovable enough to rest. Stop making self-acceptance the final reward. Begin here. Begin in the middle. Begin with what is true. Begin with one breath that does not demand explanation. Begin with one act of inner loyalty. Begin with one honest sentence. Begin with one boundary. Begin with one release. Begin with one moment of not turning against yourself. That is enough to start an opening. In fact, for many people, that is how every real opening starts. Not with certainty, with consent. The consent to be where you are. The consent to feel what you feel. The consent to tell the truth. The consent to stop forcing. The consent to let your life meet the real you rather than the overmanaged version. This kind of consent is sacred because it returns choice to you. You may not get to choose every event. You may not get to choose the timing of every answer. You may not get to choose who leaves, who stays, how others respond, or how quickly every wound transforms. But you do get to choose whether you will remain in relationship with yourself. You do get to choose whether kindness will be part of how you walk through uncertainty. You do get to choose whether you will keep making shame your teacher or whether you will let love become more of a guide. Love teaches differently. Love has patience. Love has spine. Love tells the truth without humiliation. Love does not flatter delusion, but neither does it weaponize honesty. Love says, here we are. Love says, I see the wound and the wholeness. Love says, slow down enough to hear. Love says, your pace is not a moral issue. Love says, not every burden is yours. Love says you can grieve and still belong to hope. Love says you can change without hating who you have been. Love says what is real does not need your perfection to begin. And perhaps that is the doorway you have been standing near all along. Not the doorway to some completely different life, but the doorway into a different relationship with this life. The doorway into enoughness, the doorway into truth, the doorway into self-companionship, the doorway into a gentler nervous system, the doorway into relationships that do not require constant translation of your value, the doorway into work that does not drink your soul dry, the doorway into a spirituality that includes your body, your limits, your grief, your joy, your contradictions, your humanity. When you look back on this moment months from now, you may recognize it as a turning point, not because everything changed at once, but because you stopped abandoning yourself in the places that mattered most. You stopped asking fear for permission to live. You stopped treating peace like a reward. You stopped calling self-criticism maturity. You stopped confusing effort with worth. You stopped waiting for some perfect future self to deserve compassion. And from there, quietly, steadily, life began to open. The relationships that could not hold your truth began to show themselves. The opportunities that matched your deeper values began to feel clearer. The habits built on punishment began to lose their appeal. The joys you had distrusted began to feel more available. The body you had pushed began to speak in new ways. The heart you had armored began to risk softness again. The future you had tried to control became less frightening because you no longer planned to face it by abandoning yourself. That is real transformation. Not a performance, not a slogan, not an image, a reorientation of the soul, a reorientation of how you hold yourself, a reorientation of what you call safety, a reorientation of what you will and will not trade for approval, a reorientation of the story that says your life begins later, after you fix enough, prove enough, become enough. Your life is not later. It is here. This is your life. This breath, this ache, this tenderness, this threshold, this beautiful unfinished becoming. And yes, unfinished can still be sacred. Uncertain can still be sacred. Tender can still be sacred. Slow can still be sacred. Grieving can still be sacred. Resting can still be sacred. Waiting can still be sacred when it is no longer used to deny your own presence. You are not here to perfect your humanity away. You are here to inhabit it with more love. And once that love begins to enter the places that shame once ruled, doors appear where walls used to be. Choices appear where panic used to be. Breath appears where constriction used to be. Direction appears where self-attack used to be. Connection appears where performance used to be. Not because pain has vanished, but because your relationship to pain has changed. You are no longer making it the judge of your worth. You are no longer asking suffering to certify your goodness. You are no longer measuring love by how much it hurts. You are no longer confusing depletion with devotion. You are no longer postponing peace. This is the opening you have been asking for. Not somewhere outside you first. Here, in the quiet place where you finally stop saying no to yourself. In the holy place where you let truth sit beside tenderness. In the living place where you allow the body to soften before the mind understands everything. In the courageous place where you choose coherence over image. In the patient place where you stop rushing your soul to satisfy an internal clock. In the wise place where you let life be a relationship rather than a contest. And as you move forward, something may begin to shift in ways you cannot predict yet. You may find that what once felt impossible now feels merely unfamiliar. You may discover that rest gives you more clarity than overthinking ever did. You may notice that honest grief leaves you lighter than forced positivity. You may feel a new unwillingness to place yourself where you must fragment to belong. You may sense that your standards are changing, not from hardness, but from self-respect. You may notice that your prayers become less desperate and more intimate. You may find that your choices become quieter, cleaner, truer. That is how openings speak. Not always with fireworks. Sometimes with relief. Sometimes with a deeper breath. Sometimes with the absence of an old compulsion. Sometimes with a no that feels like freedom. Sometimes with a yes that feels like coming alive. Sometimes with the simple realization that you do not want to live at war with yourself anymore. Your heart already knows this. Your body already knows this. Your soul has been waiting not for perfection, but for permission. Permission to stop performing. Permission to stop proving. Permission to stop pretending that self-rejection is discipline. Permission to stop guarding every doorway of your life with fear. Permission to trust that gentleness can be strong. Permission to let the closed places breathe. And when you finally give that permission, when you finally accept this, that you do not have to become someone else to begin, that you do not have to solve every uncertainty to soften, that you do not have to exile your tenderness to be powerful, that you do not have to postpone peace until life makes sense. Everything begins to open. Not because the world suddenly owes you ease, but because you are no longer closed against your own life. That changes what love can reach. That changes what truth can reveal. That changes what guidance can enter. That changes what you are willing to leave. That changes what you are willing to receive. That changes how you walk into tomorrow. And tomorrow matters less than this moment. This living moment, the one in which you are here now, hearing something in yourself say why. Yes to honesty, yes to breath, yes to grief with dignity, yes to joy without suspicion, yes to limits, yes to desire, yes to rest, yes to sensitivity, yes to your own pace, yes to not knowing everything. Yes to the possibility that your worth has never been in question. Yes to the possibility that acceptance is not the end of the journey, but the beginning of your real participation in it. So if nothing else remains with you, let this remain. You are not broken. You never were. You have been carrying pain, yes. You have been surviving, yes. You have been waiting, yes. You have been learning through forms of effort that may no longer serve, yes. But beneath all of that, within all of that, beyond all of that, you remain whole in ways your fear does not fully understand. And wholeness does not need to be manufactured. It needs to be welcomed. Welcomed into the places where shame once spoke. Welcomed into the body that has worked so hard to protect you. Welcomed into the heart that still wants to trust. Welcomed into the life that may not look exactly as you imagined, but still holds beauty, still holds possibility, still holds paths your current mind cannot see from where you stand. The way a river knows its path without maps, that too is inside you, a knowing deeper than panic, a movement deeper than pressure, a wisdom deeper than fear. Let yourself belong to that. Let yourself soften toward that. Let yourself be carried a little by that. And as this day continues, or as this evening settles, or as the quiet returns around you, perhaps place a hand gently on your heart and hear these words not as instruction, but as blessing. You do not have to force open what is ready to bloom. You do not have to chase what becomes clearer in stillness. You do not have to punish yourself into peace. You do not have to earn the right to rest in your own being. You do not have to keep waiting outside the door of your life. You are allowed in. You are allowed in now, into your own compassion, into your own honesty, into your own becoming, into your own sacred, imperfect, luminous life. And maybe that is the real miracle. Not that the world suddenly rearranges itself to match every hope, but that you stop withholding yourself from the life that is here. You stop delaying your tenderness. You stop bargaining with your worth. You stop making love prove itself through suffering. You stop rehearsing rejection before joy has even had a chance to enter. You stop treating your humanity as an obstacle to enlightenment. You stop believing that only the future version of you deserves peace. This version deserves it. This version deserves a kinder story. This version deserves a slower breath. This version deserves to be met with reverence. This version deserves truth without cruelty. This version deserves a life that does not require constant self-erasure. This version deserves to be loved by you. And when that love begins, even imperfectly, even tremulously, even in small daily returns, everything begins to open. A little more room in the chest, a little more trust in your own timing, a little less panic around the unknown, a little less loyalty to depletion, a little more tenderness toward the parts that once embarrassed you, a little more courage to release what cannot meet you, a little more willingness to let goodness arrive without suspicion, a little more capacity to stand in the truth of who you are without apology. This is how a life changes. Quietly at first, internally first, and then unmistakably. So breathe, dear heart. Breathe and let this settle where it needs to settle. You do not need to rush your understanding. You do not need to turn this into another task. You do not need to prove that you heard it correctly. Your body already recognizes what your soul has been waiting to hear. The opening does not ask for force. It asks for consent, for kindness, for honesty, for the willingness to stop standing against yourself. And once you do, once you truly do, once even a small part of you says, I will no longer make war with my own life, light begins to enter places you thought would stay closed forever. That light may come as clarity. It may come as grief finally moving. It may come as rest you no longer resist. It may come as a truth you can no longer deny. It may come as a relationship ending. It may come as a boundary forming. It may come as a new devotion to your own well-being. It may come as a very ordinary day that feels strangely more inhabitable than yesterday. Do not underestimate that. An inhabitable life is holy. A life you can actually live inside, not merely manage, is holy. A life in which your spirit does not have to hide from your own expectations is holy. A life in which peace is permitted before all answers are known is holy. And that holiness has not been withheld from you. It has been waiting beneath the noise, beneath the pressure, beneath the old bargains, beneath the inherited voices, beneath the fear that said, if you soften, you will lose everything. But perhaps the opposite is closer to true. Perhaps when you soften in the right ways, you stop losing yourself. Perhaps when you accept what is real, you stop leaking life force into denial. Perhaps when you honor your own heart, what is aligned can finally find you more clearly. So let this be the moment. Not because everything is solved, not because every wound is closed, not because every answer has arrived. Let this be the moment because you are done postponing your own presence, done postponing peace, done postponing kindness, done postponing the simple, radical act of staying on your own side. You have been carrying this for so long. You do not have to carry it alone inside yourself anymore. Something in you recognizes the truth now. The truth that acceptance is not surrender to less. It is surrender to what is real enough to become the ground of change. It is the moment the locked places hear permission. It is the moment the frightened parts hear welcome. It is the moment the exhausted body hears, you can stop bracing all the time. It is the moment the heart hears, you do not have to earn your way home. It is the moment the soul hears, now we can begin. And yes, now we can begin.